This video is to show you how to train specific tasks for either a psychiatric service dog or seizure alert dogs. We're going to be covering how to do medical alert, how to do deep pressure therapy, and some other tasks. In the very beginning phases of training, you're going to be using treats and getting your dog used to simply taking them out of your hand so that you can move on to more complicated tasks. Okay. Whether you're starting with a dog that you have just adopted, whether it's an adult or a puppy, you're going to start by giving it treats from your hand, making sure that it's taking the treats gently, and that it's going to be motivated to figure out how to get the treats from you. We can use both operant conditioning and classical conditioning to teach a dog to alert to psychiatric conditions as well as seizures. Good girl. For example, if we're training a dog to recognize seizures, we're going to be using a combination of operant conditioning and classical conditioning. Owners can also train a dog to respond to seizures when the dog is alerting naturally. When we are training a dog for classical conditioning, we're training the dog to associate one stimulus with another. When a dog is alerting naturally to seizures, this is a dog that is more anxious and more distressed about the fact that their owner is having a seizure. So the dog is associating the negative events of the seizure with the precursor of the seizure, which is what we believe to be a chemical scent. Because I don't have seizures, I can't produce the seizure, I can't produce that stressful event for the dog. So I'm doing training a little bit differently, where I'm training the dog through operant conditioning first, and then I'm going to have the dog associate the operant conditioning, the treat, the positive motivation with classical conditioning. The classical conditioning is where the dog is associating the seizure and the precursor. So before the seizure actually occurs, there is this precursor, or it's seizure activity. The dog can pick up on this through the chemical scent, the change in their handler, the chemical change. The dog can smell this, and over time they realize, I can smell this change in my handler, and then the stressful event occurs. That is classical conditioning. When we're training a dog through operant conditioning first, a trainer would usually be doing this if they don't have seizures and they're going to be placing a dog with the recipient that has seizures. They are training the dog to be motivated to perform a certain behavior through positive reinforcement, and then later it's classical conditioning, when the dog associates that positive motivation and a specific behavior with the classical conditioning, which is the seizure. If the recipient themselves already has seizures and they already have a dog, for example, I have seizures and this is my dog that I have gotten to learn to alert to my seizures. I'm going to be having seizures, so I can't always predict when these seizures are going to happen, but the dog is noticing this stressful event for me. That's classical conditioning. The dog is understanding there is this precursor, and it happens every time before the stressful event happens. Once that stressful event happens, the dog is exhibiting a certain behavior of distress. So the dog might start pawing at me or start whining or barking. It's going to be a behavior that the dog is doing naturally without training. Once the dog understands the classical conditioning, they already understand the precursor and the stressful event, and they're exhibiting a stress behavior, then you're going to use operant conditioning to encourage the dog to continue that behavior. So it might be as simple as, "You're such a good girl for alerting me. Good job, good job." It could be you're giving the dog a treat for responding that way. A lot of times when a dog is first exhibiting behaviors, you may not notice that as the stress behavior. You may not notice that's the signal that you're waiting for to recognize that your dog is telling you that you're about to have a seizure. So just ignoring that behavior is not going to be as helpful as using operant conditioning, which is encouraging the behavior through positive reinforcement. Again, positive reinforcement is going to be giving the dog a treat or praising the dog. Now we're going to be discussing how a trainer would work with a dog when the trainer themselves don't have seizures. So that is where you're going to be using operant conditioning first, and later pairing that behavior with the seizure, which would be the classical conditioning. So in this case, I'm going to encourage the dog to exhibit a specific behavior to receive a food reward. It's very simple. The behavior I'm looking for is going to be something that's more distinct and it's going to be more obvious. In the beginning, I want the dog to be encouraged to crawl up my leg to get a treat. So the dog has put her paw on my leg, and I'm going to give her a treat for that. If you have a very sensitive dog, it might be difficult to have them crawl up on your lap. So you might even need to put them up on your lap themselves. Later, the dog will start to paw at your leg. This is called shaping, where you're asking the dog for a little bit more each time in order for them to receive the food reward. Alert. Good girl. In the end, the behavior looks like this. Alert. Good girl. Now you're jealous. Alert. Good girl. Alert. Good girl. Once the dog is placed with the recipient, the person who has the seizures, they are going to be playing this alert game with the dog right after they have a seizure. Or someone else in the home may be playing the alert game with the dog while they're having a seizure. Over time, the dog starts to pair this behavior, alert, with the fact that their owner is exhibiting a precursor to the seizure activity. And the dog is then telling the handler that they're about to have a seizure. Alert. Good girl. Alert. Good girl. That is operant conditioning used first by teaching the dog a specific behavior through food rewards, and then going back to classical conditioning where the dog is associating that learned behavior with the precursor of the seizure and the actual seizure itself. Other behaviors that would be useful would be the watch me command. Watch me. Good girl. And this just helps the dog to learn to focus on you. The more focused the dog is on the recipient, the more likely it is that they're going to notice subtle changes in the recipient, such as the precursor to a seizure. Watch me. Watch me. Daisy, watch me. Good girl. I'm going to do Daisy, watch me. Good girl. Deep pressure therapy is used for a couple different reasons. It can be used for psychiatric disorders. It could be used for seizures. Either way, it's going to help to reduce anxiety and stress in the handler, either after they've had a seizure or after they've had a flashback or a panic attack. It can also be used to help stabilize the recipient when they're having a seizure. In the beginning for deep pressure therapy, we are using treats, and the treats are weaned off. Deep pressure therapy can be used while the recipient is either sitting or laying down on the floor or on a couch or a bench. We're going to talk a little bit about service dog etiquette. Whenever you have a service dog with you in public, you're trying to have the dog blend in with the surroundings. You're trying not to draw attention to the dog. You are trying to keep the dog from being a distraction to others, whether you're in a movie theater or a grocery store or you're at the mall or your workplace or school. We just don't want to draw a lot of attention to the dog. For that reason, you might avoid having the dog in certain areas, but if the dog is needed to be in those certain areas, the dog's still going to be there. Another example would be a dog getting on furniture. If you need the dog to get on the furniture to help you with your disability, then you'll do it. If you don't need the dog to be on the furniture to help with your disability, then you won't. For example, if I needed the dog to perform deep pressure therapy, she's going to be touching the seat. Normally I wouldn't have a dog up on furniture in public. It's just not good etiquette. But if her task is to perform deep pressure therapy, either to help me with a psychiatric condition or to help stabilize me during a seizure, then she's going to be touching the seat. The dog could be touching this seat partially when she's doing deep pressure therapy as she is now, or she might be completely on the seat next to me if I needed to back up on the seat, or if the seat were longer and she had no way to get on my lap without actually being on the seat herself. For example, if I needed to sit completely back in my seat, she would need to crawl up onto the seat herself and then perform deep pressure therapy. Daisy, paws up. Good girl. Another task that can be useful is boundary control. So if someone has a psychiatric service dog and perhaps they're claustrophobic or people are getting too close for comfort, they can place the dog in between them and other people in a way that wouldn't offend someone else, and this is not used for protection. The dog is not getting in between them and the other party intentionally, and certainly not for protection because it isn't safe. The dog is only moving there because the handler has told it to, and this is just giving that person more personal space because the dog has created a physical boundary. Down. Good girl. Stay. This has now created a physical boundary where if there were someone in front of me, they cannot get closer. I just have more personal space. Daisy touch. Down. Good girl. Awesome. If I had someone approach me from my right side, I simply have her get in between me and the other party. Daisy touch. Down. Good girl. Stay. Little Angel Service Dogs is helping to train and place dogs with disabled recipients, dogs that are fully trained, and we're also helping people to train their own dogs themselves. If you need any help, please give us a call. Our number is 619-448-4428, and our website is littleangelsservicedogs.org.